Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.
Welcome back to the Inner Athlete Podcast. I've got Coach Matt here, and we're going to get pretty much straight into it. We're going to talk about the in-season and continuing to train outside of your practice in the gym and working on specific qualities. And yeah, Matt, I'll let you take it off and give us the people a bit more context.
Yeah, so like just Trent alluded to there, so talking about more applicable to team sport athletes. So right now we're about mid-season for most sports, or ending the season if you're basketball and netball, those sort of court sports. But yeah, just want to harp on the importance of maintaining strength training while in season. I guess the main benefits there to keep all the gains and the progress you made from the pre-season and the off season, you did all the work you did there, and then obviously trying to limit or negate any potential injuries that may be arising that can be caused from, overuse or just weakness or imbalance from left and right, imbalance from the upper body and lower body, any deficiencies you might have seen playing your sport. You've had half a season of your sample size where you might realize, okay, well, I don't know, my lateral quickness is suffering, or my hamstrings or my back's pulling up sore, or whatever it might be. Whatever these little alarm signs that pop up, just gives us a chance to touch on them quickly and see if we can,
Cool.
see if we can get them, sorted.
Yeah, I guess there's a concept or an idea. It's called the residual training effects.
Mm-hmm.
And the residual training effects covers off speed, power, muscular strength, muscular endurance, cardiovascular fitness, then lactate as well. So your ability to buffer lactate.
Yep.
And when we train these characteristics, we stop training them for whatever reason, these characteristics can stay at a high level for a certain period of time.
Yep.
And then from a sporting perspective, conditioning becomes less of an issue in season because you kind of do it in your drills, in training. Your heart rate's elevated. It might be 150 beats, or might spike up to 180 beats if you're doing like some small-sided games or some short bursts of conditioning, just to help top up. But probably the biggest thing we tend to see is more the decline in, running speed and power.
Yeah.
Now, these qualities, they really have a window of 5 days, give or take, or 3 to 5 days, give or take, 2 days either side, depending on the individual.
Yeah.
What that really means is we need to be training high velocity, high contractile movements, so whether it's sprinting, jumping, change of direction at a high intensity quite frequently. Now, the best way you can actually think about it is more microdosing. So when it comes to the athletes here, so whether it's football, soccer, we like to microdose some sort of speed element within their training. So usually we do like a general warm-up, then we do a more specific warm-up where we ramp up the intensity. We might do some med ball, kick tosses, slams, box jumps, hurdle jumps, depending on the athlete that we're working with. And as a result, we want to put in some sort of speed work, especially for the field-based sports. So like football, soccer, rugby, we've got a lacrosse guy as well, and even baseball as well. I think that kind of gets a sport that does get overlooked, even if you're playing winter cricket or something like that. And as a result, when you microdose it, so most of the members here, they'll train 2 or 3 times a week. We tend to put it in each time, and that we might change the specific movement that it is. It might be like a Swiss ball sprint start to 20 meters. It might be a 5-10-5 if we want to do more lateral work. Or it might be some sort of, triple broad jump series, or, depth drop to box jump or something like that as well. So we're keeping the muscles almost like fast and twitchy all the time, but we're doing it enough in order to maintain that quality. But some people actually will see some sort of upside if they do it long enough as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like you say, so the more repetition you get, the better you're going to get at it. So that's where like someone who's maybe a bit more of a novice or a beginner in that sort of sense, they can actually gain speed and gain that top end speed throughout the season, whether or where in the past you sort of see that as a myth per se, is you can't really gain speed or strength or power during season. But like I say, to remember, especially for youth athletes, and we're working from a pretty, beginner base level in terms of strength, speed, and power. Especially if we've just started training here, we like to focus on more general strength and muscular endurance and whatnot. When we're tapping into that more speed and power, a lot of the time that's quite new to the individual. So yeah, we can actually improve those areas throughout season, which hopefully leads into almost like a peaking effect when we're getting to finals or end of season, when we want to be our best. Again, want to be best all the time, but I guess physically and how we've prepared, we're sort of leading up to the finals, the most important time of the year, in the best shape possible physically.
Then you alluded to something before. You mentioned about peaking for finals. Now, a lot of people that a lot of the kids actually come here. Now, one of the things, I'm not bashing any programs or any coaches or anything like that, right? But a lot of what we hear from parents is, or even the athletes themselves, it's like, hey, are you doing any sprint training? Are you doing like any skill-based work where you're breaking it down, doing very different start positions, whether you start on your front in a prone position or on your back or half kneeling, and you're working on being, getting low, fast turnover of the feet, as if what you would see in the sporting performance. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, no, they're not doing some sort of warm-up specific work that's going to help them develop that skill acquisition component of sprinting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real low-hanging fruit for a lot of coaches that they're really missing, and they're just avoiding it. And most of the time is, if you ask kids, what do you think their biggest problem is acceleration and speed.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you try and microdose it for 10 minutes? Get someone in, just come in for 10 minutes, expose the kids to some sort of running skills. And what will happen is you'll have like a layering effect. So you do your general warm up, might be some sort of skills, games, mobility, whatever it is. Then you transition towards some sort of like speed specific work. That will carry throughout the whole session if they start to understand and feel better in the actual skills specific as well. So then you've got a simple to complex when it comes to the skill acquisition of sprinting and running and change of direction, because the skills are transferable. The whole idea is get them faster, and get them faster by putting them in the correct positions, get them to feel it and understand it. Then you transition into some sort of skill-based work, then transition towards some sort of small-sided game, and they start to notice like, oh, I'm feeling faster, or you start to see that transition effect, and you do it not just in one session, you have to do it over multiple weeks in order to get the desired effect. On the back end of the season, your team's faster, more agile, they're probably using less energy, so in the last quarter or the last 20 minutes, they're going to feel a lot better, and they're going to be able to put the hammer down, because if you're running more efficiently, you're conserving more energy, which is an upside, but then you can tap into that later on down the track. So where it is, like I said, finals, last 20 minutes of the match, the final 2 minutes, was a 2-minute drill in basketball and whatnot.
Yeah.
These types of like areas, I think is where a lot of junior sports could maximize the potential of the athletes and the players.
Yeah, and like you just alluded to in terms of, I guess, the subconscious effects, like if you think of microdosing, so if we're microdosing speed, say here, so they're getting, well, by microdosing, you're limited as a coach in terms of the amount of cues you can give and the amount of coaching advice you can give. They're only doing 4 to 5 reps of, 10, 20 meter sprints in a session. We can't overload them with too many different coaching cues, because it's going to get confused. So in the same way, like just the repetition, we're going to get faster. Having them focus on 1 or 2 cues here, and then going into, if they're hopefully doing some speed work at their training as well, they can focus on those cues there. And then the same way that the speed just becomes subconsciously laid, the same coaching cues can get subconsciously laid throughout the weeks, and they get more proficient, and they come in next week, okay, we've nailed whatever last week's cue is, now we're going to focus on this one, and they're just slowly getting better and better and better, just optics wise in terms of how the technique looks, and then hopefully that carries over, like we Trent alluded to there, in terms of their speed, agility, running efficiency, and hopefully, like I say, running economy and their aerobic fitness is going to benefit as a result of improving their speed.
Yeah, because you can do as much skills as you want, but if you don't have the speed to express those skills, unfortunately, those skills won't be expressed well at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest downside. Then if we talk more from a strength perspective, right? So muscular strength if we're talking about the residual training effects, can last for up to 30 days, give or take 5 days, depending on the individual, right? So in this case, and power is a little bit different. I think power is because it's more central based. So talking about the brain and the spinal cord and which helps to coordinate the muscles. That I think I can't remember the top of my head, but it's a shorter window of time.
Yeah.
So I think it's about up to maybe 18 days, I believe.
Yeah, I thought it was 10 to 15.
Yeah, you're probably right on that one. So when it comes to power and strength, we want to continue to maintain those qualities. So what we sometimes can do is we do more of a power block. Emphasis doesn't mean we neglect strength. It means just strength is just a part of it, but power becomes more of an emphasis. Then we back off from that as well, let them recover and adapt. It might have had a harder 2 or 3 week window when it comes to their performance. Then we reintroduce that as well. So we keep that quality going, and we can still generally building out throughout the season as well. And we want to make sure that the athletes are still moving fast and have confidence in themselves, being explosive. And a lot of the soccer kids that you're working with, if not their power they've maintained their strength and power and speed. If not, some of them have actually improved throughout the season.
Yeah, so I think the sort of approach I've taken, I've sort of just made it up, I guess. So I guess it's a mix of, conjugate and contrast type training. So if they're here twice a week, having a vertical contrast focus and a horizontal contrast focus. And again, each program, so each 4 or 5 weeks, they're changing the exercise. So it might be RDL for contrast focus, it might be a trap bar, it might be a normal deadlift, it might be a power snatch or power clean,
high pull,
like yeah. And then vertical focus, we're changing from a full squat to a box squat to a high box squat to a front box squat to a whatever it might be. So I guess that's a sort of conjugate element in there. So again, relinquishing that monotony to the training, we're not going to come in and do the same sort of thing. But yeah, so pairing that contrastingly, so having the high force movement, then an accelerated movement, so a banded jump or something along those lines, and then the full over accelerated movement, so it might be a band assisted jump, or it might be a broad jump, a band assisted, or it might be a triple broad jump, or whatever it might be, or it might be sprints even as well in that contrast loading. So having that focus up at the top of their main session, so following all the mobility and the speed and microdose power stuff or speed in the warm-ups, then moving on to the contrast loading, moving on to their main strength lift, so it would be an upper body lift of some sort, and then paired with some upper body pull or something along those lines, and then finishing off with their accessory work. So as we sort of touched on at the start, so trying to limit any of those overuse injuries, so their adductors, hamstrings, calves, tibialis, all of those shoulders, so internal, external rotating, and the shoulders especially, just focusing on whatever the individual athlete might have had previous injuries to, or might have brought up about in season that they're a bit sore. And yeah, I guess the good part about the way we program here at Athlete, every 4 weeks we're changing it up, so we're able to quickly get on top of any other issues that might be arising. So we're never leaving a program for too long. They're not going too stale in terms of the monotony side, but also in terms of the physical preparation side. We're able to quickly chop and change things if something's come up, and able to keep them prepared and moving fit and healthy, hopefully, for as long as we can.
Yeah, and I think if you look at a lot of sports, a lot of them are monotonous in nature. You're doing the same things, the same drills, same running patterns, the way that you kick the ball, strike the ball, and sometimes the monotony itself can be, I can't pronounce this word properly, but deleterious or detrimental. Detrimental is probably deleterious. I don't know if that's a word.
I don't think so.
It can be detrimental to them. So high monotony, high fatigue can lead to high fatigue, increasing the likelihood of injury.
Yeah.
When we provide some novel stimuluses, so creating enough level of variety within their training and addressing areas where, say for example, it's the soccer player that comes in. They just feel like they're a bit more battered and bruised through their knees and ankles or something like that. Then we can put in some ankle work specific. So if they feel like the lateral part of their ankle is always sore, they kind of like, for whatever reason, we can work on actually trying to strengthen up through those areas as well on the eversion and inversion side. We might even put in some split squat holds with the elevated heel and doing some calf raises to strengthen up soleus. We might incorporate some lateral pogos for them as well. So we're exposing them on both sides, so it's not overloading one aspect when they're running. As actually another point, Jake Tura, he actually mentioned this as well. When it comes to like jumping, a lot of us will tend to point our toes out, and I think this is quite important, especially in season. Like we tend to develop, bad movement patterns throughout the season if we're not conscious of how we're actually moving. Mm-hmm. And what he actually said was, when you're doing pogo jumps, and if we continually run and then the foot is turned outwards, almost like a pigeon foot, pigeon toed, we tend to load up more the medial aspect of the Achilles, right? And that area of the medial aspect, it continually gets overloaded and neglecting. Thank you. Yeah. Neglecting their lateral part. Yeah. And then it was actually a really interesting point that you actually want to make sure that we're appropriately loading the whole structure. So then the force is shared over a larger area. So therefore, we're not, the smaller parts aren't breaking down at a faster rate. This therefore can actually lead to overload to the area. Then something catastrophic could happen. So he said, just point your toes in. Yeah. When you're doing pogo jumps or doing some sort of skips or something like that, or even when you're doing single leg skips, your toes kind of invertedly like point a lot straighter. It's harder to point your toes out. So I thought that was quite interesting from that perspective. If you keep doing something one way, eventually something will happen where it's going to be negative more so. So go the other way. And that's what we try and do with the programs as well, is if you're exposed to something too much, too often, too frequently, you need to go the other way and be able to create greater capacity for the athlete at the end of the day. It reduces that overload perspective or aspect, and then the athlete's, chumming along.
Yeah. Like you say, just adding that variety and into their training is going to prepare them for that sporadic nature of whatever sport they're in and landing positions, or like you say, eliminate that overuse of, same striding pattern, the same jumping pattern. Better prepare them. Yeah,
I think the more rigid the program is, the more likely something is going to happen.
Yeah, and even recently, like in the past, we've sort of always had the same warm up day 1 and day 2, and even now recently we've changed that to maybe the mobility stuff and the physical preparation side at the first half's the same, but the second half with all the plyometrics and sprints and whatnot, we've sort of moved to a different approach from day 1 and day 2. I know I've definitely programmed that. So to keep the same structure, but just exposing them to more variety throughout the week.
Yeah, I guess variety is key in this case.
Yeah,
cool. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, nothing from me. Good luck for the finals, or good luck for the rest of the season. Hopefully you make finals.
Yeah, I think the main message is, it's not so much, yes, variety is important, but it's the context around that variety as well. So whatever you're not doing enough of, probably do a little bit more of that. Whatever you're doing too much of, probably do a little bit less of that. I think that's the general message. If you're doing a lot of conditioning-based work at training, probably need to dial back, maybe do some speed work, because that will complement the conditioning work. If you're doing very little strength work, it will complement your conditioning work, your conditioning, your speed, your durability, and your recovery as well. So I think I've spoken on a previous podcast with Nathan. Think of everything, it's like buckets. Everything has a certain capacity before it starts to overflow, and then you start neglecting other areas where other buckets could take that capacity. Then you have like more of a general robust athlete in that sense. And then I think then just monitoring the monotony, how tired the athlete is, and making sure that you're doing. If you create some variety for the athlete, they're going to feel better. as a result in general. And that's what I've seen throughout my years of coaching as well.
Yep.
Cool.
Easy.
We'll wrap it up there. If you like this one, please share, subscribe, like this one. We want to make sure that we're spreading the good word of what we're doing. And I think the main thing is, I think the more power and more knowledge that parents have about this, the better decisions they're going to make for their child. And, and their child, if you're listening to this, some of our members listen to this one, they're going to make better decisions in what they do moving forward, and they'll be able to ask more questions, whether it's to their coach or sports medicine or whoever, or even their strength coach, to help them move in the right direction when it comes to their development. Until the next one. Thanks.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.